This is Think Out Loud on OPB. I'm Dave Miller. In 2015, Shantae Johnson and her partner Arthur Shavers made a major life shift. She had worked various jobs in public health for Multnomah County. He'd had various jobs too, including as a driver. They decided to start a farm. In the decade since then, their work has expanded immensely. It now includes a nonprofit, 2 farms, a commercial kitchen, a food pantry, and soon a Black community food hub here in Gresham. It is all, though, animated by the same vision: empowering, educating, and creating economic opportunities for Black, Indigenous, and people of color who want to work in food systems. Shantae Johnson joins me now. It always tells me something when people, they need to clap and celebrate somebody before I've finished describing who they are. It tells me that people here already know you and already love you. But let's introduce you to the rest of Oregon right now. Yes. I mentioned that you and your partner made this huge life shift. My understanding is that you'd had some farming in your family backgrounds, but had never done anything like what you started 10 or 11 years ago. How did you decide to take that leap?
Well, I am an Oregon native and grew up farming with my family, mostly. My great-grandmother had a farm in Oregon City that I grew up going to, and my aunts and uncles just grew food wherever they were at. But when I started working at the county, I was there for about 8 years and started kind of just exploring different opportunities within the county. I met Mr. Jerry Hunter, who was a farmer at Crops Farm that I now get the pleasure of getting to steward that land. And I was inspired. Mr. Jerry, they call him the coach. He had this amazing farm that was about 3 acres across from Edgefield. And he had bees, but he also, all of his plots were, fashioned after sports, teams and things like that. So, a whole purple patch for the Lakers and things. And I went to that farm and I just got inspired and I called Art and I was like, I think I want to quit my job and be a farmer. And he was like, what? Okay, I'm going to do the same. So that's how it kind of started.
What made you think that you could do it?
Because I have a very tenacious spirit and I'm very adventurous. And I love nature. And so I decided that I needed a kind of a change of pace from doing nutrition policy work, and that I wanted to kind of work with my hands a lot more. And so, doing direct services was part of the work that I did before, and so there is a difference between working with the land and being able to see that change happen almost immediately, versus policy sometimes takes a little bit longer, but both work is important.
The farm that you started with, you called it Mudbone Grown. What does that mean?
Yeah, Mudbone Grown, that name came actually from Arthur's nickname. And so he was the city kid in Northeast that had this raccoon hat that had all kinds of fun adventures. And his friend used to call him Mudbone. And so when his friend came to our first farm and we were like, oh, what should we name our farm? And he was like, this is Mudbone Grown. And we're like, that's a perfect name. So that's how the name kind of evolved.
What were some of the lessons you learned early on?
To harvest squash on a more regular basis. That zucchini could get really, really huge. And that farming was a lifestyle.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that farming kind of just creeps into your world, creeps into your life where you start to work with the land and almost become obsessed with it, right? And so you get excited about planting your harvest and watching it grow, and being able to share that food with community. And so I just got hooked and then I couldn't stop.
What was the dirt like at your farm, that first farm?
That first farm, I remember it actually was off of, it was in North Portland, and it was an acre farm. And one of our friends had went to Bali for like the summer, right? And he was like, the farm is gonna be developed into new housing for community, but you can use it for now. And so Arthur and I started just growing as much food as we could. We worked with a daycare out here in East County that served about 60 families, and we grew food for the 60 families as we were learning, because we didn't want to charge people, if we were just kind of in that learning stage. And so that's how we got started.
So that was the first farm that you started, but since then, as I mentioned briefly in my intro, you've just been a whirlwind activity, including creating the Feed 'em Freedom Foundation. What is that?
Yeah, so Feed 'em Freedom evolved out of the work of Mudbone Grown. And when we were doing, well, we still are Mudbone Grown as well, so that is our for-profit enterprise. We were doing 3 different types of agricultural training programs. And so we were on the Oregon Food Bank land there and partnering with them to do these training programs. One was a Beginning Colors of Farmers training program, and we had over 100 applicants apply in that first year. And we had 10 folks that learned alongside us and learned how to farm. Some of those folks are still farming today and have their own agricultural businesses. We did a Boots to Roots program working with veterans, and then we had a Pathways to Farming program that focused on helping people create their own agricultural businesses as well. And Feed 'em Freedom came into play because we wanted to expand upon that and do more, getting into more education and more outreach into community, and just to be able to grow more food, have our food pantry, and do those kind of things.
Did you have educational opportunities like what you're trying to provide to other people right now?
Yeah, we went through Oregon State University's BUFA program. It was a Beginning Urban Farmers Apprenticeship program. And there was a marketing track, and then there was a community track. And because we already know how to work with community, we chose the marketing track, Arthur and I. And we went through that program. One of our mentors, Jen Aaron, is an amazing farmer. She lives out in Corbett, and we're still in contact with her today. So that's how we learned how to do more of the technical skills.
Can you tell us about the Black Community Food Hub that you're creating now?
Yeah, so the Food Hub, so there's a few things. The Food Hub is probably about 2 minutes away from this location. And we purchased a 5-acre space. And what we're currently doing now is we're working with a lot of farmers, about over 30 farmers, to help them create institutional pathways, or create pathways into institutional markets, right? And so a lot of farmers want to just stay on the farm. They don't want to have to worry about going to farmers markets or taking their food to sell it to schools or other institutions, right? And so the Food Hub kind of evolved from that, because we know what that struggle was like, to always think about well, where is this food going to go? If we're really, there's a lot of amazing, great growers out here in East County that are growing a lot of food for community, and sometimes they just don't have that outlet. And so that's how the Food Hub came to be.
What's it like to have your own land now? For years you were leasing or working land that somebody else owned, but now you have some of your own land.
Yeah. It feels really good to be able to not have to think about moving from place to place, and to really, we've started with just building out the land and building alongside community. And so for the past couple months, we've been working with Oregon State University to do a Food Hub kind of series, or food forest series, where communities coming in to do some skill sharing with one another. But we're also bringing in OSU instructors to help support some of that learning. And so one of those first workshops was all about how to start your own food forest.
Wait, what's a food forest?
A food forest, there's many, people have their own definitions of food forest, right? So for us, the food forest is a place where there is over 30 plus fruit trees. There's an understory of herbs and flowers. And so it's not like her traditional kind of like, straight row, growing. It's a place where there's a lot of diversity built into the space. And so what we've designed at what we call the North Star Food Forest and Food Hub, right down the street, is the community got to help pick out, what types of fruit trees they would like. Even forest bathing can happen in a food forest, right? Which is kind of like a fancy word for like walking through the forest and things. But that food forest will be a place where people can forage and gather herbs and things.
A lot of the work that you're doing is for people who want to have some kind of career in the food growing world. But plenty of people listening may want to just get more active growing food on a much smaller scale, on a window box, on their patio, in their yard if they have a yard. What advice do you have for people who just want to sort of dip their toes in this world, but unlike you, they're not going to actually become farmers?
I would say come into community green spaces and grow alongside your neighbors. Something that we've talked about with some of these workshops is like these tree guilds, right? And there's just communities of tree guilds, which is, we might look at like what are some of the First Nation foods. And there'll be a whole tree area that's focused on those first foods. Or there'll be a guild that has like a space for plant dyeing, plants that you could dye, like clothes and tie-dye with indigo and things. And so I would say that people that want to just come and experience farming or growing food, but to just come and be with in community with us.
5 years ago, you were featured in a really beautiful segment on OPB TV's Oregon Field Guide. And at the end of it, you said this: "We really love what we do, and we are going to farm until the day we die." That was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you still feel the same way?
I do feel the same way. It was probably a couple of days ago that we're now building our own food forest on our land out in Corbett. And I got to sit out there in the middle of the field with art and play music and just be in that space without any outside noise or anything like that, and look around and see the corn that my children planted and the squash and the herbs and the beginning of these, my own food forest. And I can say that I still hold that deeply within, that I don't want this to ever stop.
You mentioned your kids. Is parenting different on a farm now than it was when you were in the city?
I think our kids have a lot more space to just grow and breathe and be. But also, when I talk about the corn, I call it the children of the corn patch, because they were tussling a little bit as they were planting the corn. But yeah, I think it is different. And I think that sometimes, maybe they get frustrated with having to be so far outside the city, but also times they really appreciate being able to catch frogs and be with the sheep and play with baby chicks.
We are talking in August right now. What does August look like for you as a farmer?
August looks like, for me as a farmer, we have a lot of blueberries. I mean, the cucumbers are pumping out of the high tunnels, and summer squash and tomatoes and peppers, and the food is just flowing. And we're working with, like I said, multiple farmers that are bringing in their yields as well, and looking at storage crops, and planning around that so that we can make sure that we can feed ourselves but also feed community.
Shante Johnson, thanks very much. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
Shantae Johnson is the executive director of the Freedom Foundation, co-founder of Mudbone Grown. Thanks so much to everybody in our audience, all the folks we talked to, and to the folks here at Multnomah County Library who made this show possible. Let us take over the auditorium for an hour or so. Our production staff includes Malia Fass, who heroically produced today's show, Rolly Hernandez, Gemma DiCarlo, senior producer Allison Frost, and managing producer Shiraz Sadiq. Idrissa Guy is our intern for the summer. Nalene Silva and Layla Isbell engineer the show from the Gert Boyle studio when we're not in beautiful places like this auditorium. Our technical director is Stephen Cray. Our executive producer is Sage Van Wing. If you don't want to miss any of our shows, you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Our nightly rebroadcast is at 8 p.m. Thanks very much for tuning in to Think Out Loud on OPB and KLCC. I'm Dave Miller. Thanks so much.